first time we're doing a show together, Sal. What's going on?
Yeah, what's up, Nolan? We're both pinch hitting tonight, so should be fun. I'm excited. Get the show in, showdown slate. Anything can happen, and yeah, it seems like there's a lot of pieces that you can kind of get to tonight and feel decent about.
That's right. Eric Vojvodich will be back tomorrow night as well. I will be with him breaking down the Monday Nighter. But for now, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Rams-Browns game coming up. First, just want to thank our sponsor on Fantasy Draft from Fantasy Draft. If you haven't been playing on Fantasy Draft, get over there and check it out. You can play for no-rake tournaments all the time. They have a great monthly fee. So let's say you want to play up to $3,000 a month in entry fees. That costs you $15 a month. That's it. Just $15 a month. You get to play up to $3,000. Say you want to play up to $1,000 or something. That's only $6 a month. So it's a lot lower rake every time you play over there. Make sure to go check it out. They had some great contests this week. Quite often there's overlay right now as well, which is it's one of the first. Those are the first lineups that I fill out every single week. So head on over, check it out, support the show. Give us a like if you don't mind. We greatly appreciate it. How's your day been so far? What's been going on with your lineups? Little craziness.
Yeah, no, the day's been good. I was just saying before the show that in one of my like three, I play a lot of single entry and 3-max, and one of my like main 3-max lineups, a big 2v2 I had that just blew up in my face was swapping out Keenan Allen and Dalvin Cook for Chris Carson and Ezekiel Elliott, and that is it's still right now. I'm watching Keenan Allen catch balls in the fourth quarter. And it's like cutting me deeper. So that's something that hurt. But overall, it seems to be a good day. Some of the chalk did fine and some didn't. So usually when that happens, I find myself usually taking stands on certain players. So it seemed to work out better today, especially in cash.
The game's over and Chris Carson's still fumbling. It ain't pretty.
Yeah,
hopefully you don't have too much Saquon Barkley in your lineups or in your season longs.
No, not much there, but I mean, I don't know if they can see the hat. In my heart, there's a lot of Saquon, so hopefully he's okay.
All right, so I had the inactives pulled up here for this game tonight, and they have disappeared on me. So I'll just go over some of the key ones. Maybe you can fill me in if I'm missing anything.
Yeah, definitely.
We have two cornerbacks, starting cornerbacks out for the Cleveland Browns. Is that right? When Denzel Ward and Greedy Williams.
Yeah, so right now, I mean, this Cleveland secondary is just it's really taking a hit. So yeah, you have Denzel Ward out, you have Greedy Williams out. They also have Demarius Randall, so total of 3 cornerbacks, and you're going to have Morgan Burnett, a starting safety, out. So they're down 4 D-backs right now. They're going back to their 4th and 5th string cornerbacks to start this game on the outsides. Not even talking about the slot with Cooper Kupp. So yeah, it's not pretty for what the secondary is going to look like tonight against a very manageable offense.
Right. And then on the Rams side, we have Higbee out and Gerald Everett stepping in there. That's going to be interesting. We'll probably get to that a little bit. Anything else standing out to you from these inactives?
No, nothing. Just the Rams side. It was mainly Higbee. The other thing that is not inactive, but Aaron Donald is healthy and he'll be playing tonight. He seems to be a full go. So that's definitely something that can impact the game. But in terms of offensive players, just Tyler Higbee being out is going to open up a lot more routes run for Gerald Everett.
And then, of course, we have not Tyler Higbee. We have Rashad Higgins out as well. So that's going to leave up some interesting moves for you to make in your lineups today if you want to possibly pop in a Damian Ratley, possibly a Taiwan Taylor. There's a lot of cheap options for you in your lineup. So let's dive in right now. Let's go over the Cleveland Browns top plays. Start off with the quarterback in the passing game. What are your general thoughts on Baker Mayfield tonight?
Yeah, so I mean, just looking at this, as you have 2 of the 3 highest priced players being quarterbacks, I think you have to take a stand at one of them, especially if you're not somebody entering a ton of lineups. I'm taking that stand just more so on Jared Goff, mainly because we just talked about the secondary there, just being absolutely broken up. Even with Jared Goff being on the road, I still like it a little bit more than getting to Baker. You might be able to say Baker has more rushing upside, but I don't know if it's by that big of a margin that I get to more Baker than Goff. So in terms of Baker, just not getting to as much because of the slate. I think he's fine overall, but also down to number 3 wide receiver. So a lot of things just kind of going against him when you look at the context of the slate.
Yeah, so we have him projected for about 37% ownership in the utility spot and 9% captain spot, with a 65% chance of being one of the top 6 players in the field. So it seems like maybe he's going a little bit under-owned. Might be a contrarian play today.
Yeah. I think like the main thing there is just like when you choose between Goff and Baker, like I personally just think that having like one quarterback is the way to go, depending on like how you're making the lineup correlate. But getting to both of them, yeah, you're definitely going to be contrarian, especially since two of the three of them are the highest price on the slate.
Right. There's the rub. They're both expensive, so it's a little bit hard to do. And if you want to get both of them, if you want Baker, you're probably going to be stacking them up with Odell Beckham Jr., and that's making your lineup pretty impossible already. So it's pretty difficult to fit both these guys in, but maybe we'll try it a little bit later on. So let's talk a little bit about these Cleveland pass catchers. We've got Odell Beckham Jr., David Njoku is out, Jarvis Landry. What about these big boys? Are you a fan of Odell Beckham Jr. tonight? Are you going to be using him in your captain slot?
Yeah, I think he's definitely worth consideration if you're playing multiple lineups. It's fine getting there. I think to me at that price point, it makes it a little bit more difficult, but he's second on the team in routes run. He has 77, just right behind Jarvis Landry. His routes just have higher upside because they're further down the field. 100% of the snaps so far this year. The guy's obviously a game breaker. We saw it last week. The matchup is not that hard at all. They'll put him into the slot if they need to get a better matchup. But in terms of just the cornerbacks he'll be facing, Marcus Peters took a huge step backwards last year. Nothing concerning really there. If he has to leave on him, maybe a little bit more of a problem, but they'll move him all around the field. So if you want to get to Odell, it's fine. It's just a matter of what you'll be doing with the rest of your lineup. So I lean to get him in like a utility spot when I get to him, just to have more to work with from the rest of my lineup when it comes to getting more skilled players in there.
Makes sense. Talib not normally a shadow corner, right? So it stays on one end there.
Yeah, and he's not somebody who will come into the slot even if he was to shadow. But yeah, neither of these guys. Peters will be the one that shadows more, but neither of them will like move into the slot. They'll put Odell, like you saw last week, just taking anything and a slant to the house at any moment.
That's right. So he's our highest projected player on the slate in Awesomo's rankings tonight. Odell Beckham Jr. is, and it looks like we also have him kind of going under-owned about 10% in the captain spot, and we have him projected for about 30% chance of being that top player. So that if you want to differentiate in some of these larger tournaments, a lot of people are going to be stacking up the Rams partially because of this weakened Browns secondary. Contrarian play and possibly the best play on the slate is to pop Beckham Jr. into your captain spot and then worry about the rest of your lineup there. So we saw David Njoku, or actually, sorry, let's touch on these secondary receivers for the Browns. Do you have any interest in Damian Ratley, Tywan Taylor, anybody else? I think that's probably it for your options, unless I'm missing someone.
Yeah, so I mean, just secondary interests. I actually, so like on the season, I'm not that high on Jarvis Landry coming into the season, and right now, even just playing in the slot, he's somebody who needs a lot of overall just volume to kind of produce. And now with Odell coming there, just going to take volume away. And he's not a guy who really stood out last year when Freddie Kitchens took over as just getting fed with targets. But right now, he's leading the team in routes run, which might be expected. 4 more than Odell at 81. He's been on the field nonstop, and he's seen 14 targets through 2 weeks. The best matchup on this team is probably going to be in the slot, and that's where Jarvis will be. So not as high upside with his targets in terms of the A-dot, not a guy that's active around the red zone. But like when you factor in his price point of 7,400, I do have slight interest there as more of a utility option than the captain. Damian Ratley comes into play. He ran 28 routes last week. He played about 50% of the snaps, caught 2 balls for 50 yards with Rashad Higgins out. Higgins is out once again. So at $2,000, yeah, I think Ratley is worth consideration. I think we have 2 viable guys in that low 2K range tonight. He would be the second of the 2 that I have interest in. But yeah, there's interest there. And then no interest in Tywan Taylor, just only has ran 12 routes through 2 weeks. So just not enough opportunity.
But he's so cheap.
Yeah,
he's one.
He's $200. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're playing like 150, you could have one of them, but I'm probably not.
You're crushing my hopes and dreams. I have this perfect sneaky Goff lineup that I want to throw in there, but it only works if Taylor does anything tonight. But you're right, the snap count's just not there. It's nothing more than a flyer. You're kind of hoping for that one long catch. And
that reminds me. Last year, I think Robert Tonyan on a Thursday night game for the Packers tight end. He played like no snaps on the year, caught a long touchdown pass. I'm a Packers fan, so is my cousin. So my cousin, I was talking to him about it before the game about just the showdown slate, and he was like, there's been talks last month about Robert Tonyan, and I was like, the guy hasn't stepped on the field. He was like, you should play him because he's so cheap, and I was like, no, I'm not playing him. I didn't play him, and then he catches that ball, and I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Amazing, that's hilarious. All right, well, you'll be on him next time you get that tip, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about the most intriguing part of this Cleveland offense, at least for this slate anyways. David Njoku goes down last week. I was thinking Ricky Seals-Jones was going to get those snaps, but it looks like it's Demetrius Harris. What are you doing with this position? Do you have any thoughts? Are you all over the Demetrius Harris, or do you want any like Pharaoh Brown in there as well?
Yeah, nothing with Pharaoh Brown, nothing with Ricky Seals-Jones. I think Seals-Jones would be the one to kind of take over the former Demetrius Harris role here of running just a couple routes a game. With Njoku on IR, Demetrius Harris will be the primary pass catching tight end. He's run just 24 routes so far behind Njoku through 2 weeks, or really a week and a half before Njoku got hurt. So there's some interest because of the price point. He'll be utilized in the red zone, which is appealing. But there's a tight end on the Rams side that is in the same price range that I would rather get to. And he's cheap enough that, you can get there really easily. Can you play both of them? Sure. I think you're capping your ceiling a little bit. So I think it's fine getting to him. There is red zone upside, which is good for a showdown slate when you're that cheap. I would just rank him, not to bury the lead, but like a guy like Gerald Everett will get to. He's a guy in this slate that I don't want to be getting away from when it comes to choosing between him and Harris.
Yeah, sounds good. Harris was on the field for 54 snaps last game, 78%. So he's your go-to guys. $1,800 on DraftKings, $5,000 on Fanduel. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that play, as well as Ratley. If you got to fit him in, you got to fit him in. But they're just too cheap on DK to completely ignore.
I agree.
All right. Let's move on to this Browns running game here. So last week we had Nick Chubb, kind of a dudded against the New York Jets there, and then we got Dontrell Hilliard, who was out last week, and Ernest Johnson stepped in. Looks like Hilliard's back. Are you going to be throwing him in as like the third down back Duke Johnson role? And I guess this means no Ernest Johnson.
Yeah, so this is the thing that's interesting. Week 1, we saw 70% of the snaps go to Nick Chubb, and then those final 30% were split up between Dontrell Hilliard, and then split up between D'Ernest and Johnson. You had 18%, I believe, going to Hilliard, 12% to Johnson. So they were both still involved, as sort of both of them filling in for Nick Chubb. Then we saw last week, no Hilliard. We saw a 40% split in a game that kind of got out of hand, but 40% of the snaps for D'Ernest and Johnson. So I actually think, if I had to project this, I think you would see sort of even split between D'Ernest and Johnson and Dontrell Hilliard tonight. Somewhere probably, I mean, you saw it a little bit week 1 with 18 and 12%. Somewhere around 15% for each is probably what I would be projecting for snaps. The only thing that was a little bit concerning last week was Nick Chubb was coming off the field a lot on third downs. So if that's the case, you might actually, instead of seeing Chubb get the 70% of snaps you got week 1, getting 60% last week. Again, part of that might be game flow, but he might be going down closer to maybe 65% if they keep taking him off the field on third downs. Hilliard seems to be definitely the better pass catching back, the guy that kind of fits the Duke Johnson mold a little bit more. They wanted to get Chubb more involved in the receiving game. They have to an extent, but yeah, seeing him come off the field on third downs was a little bit worrisome. So I have interest in Chubb. I'm probably, just because there's definitely viable cheap options on this slate, some we haven't gotten to. Hilliard I'd get to over Johnson, just because I think he'll be on the field for more third downs, but I'm not getting to it as much as I would prefer Demetrius Harris in that exact situation.
So Hilliard, if I could channel my inner Osimo for a minute here, I believe like what he would say is maybe you want to really think about how you're constructing your lineups if you're using him, right? So if you're heavy on the Rams passing attack and maybe you want to sneak in Hilliard, then there's a story and a narrative there where Cleveland's passing more, they're more comfortable with him on passing downs or in the passing game generally. So then maybe he gets a higher snap count. So those are the kind of lineups that I would probably seek to use him in. What are your thoughts? Kind of buried the lead there on the running backs. What are your thoughts on Nick Chubb tonight? Do you like him as a value? How do you fit him into this construction with the Rams favored by 4? It's a little bit it's difficult to imagine the Browns maybe winning this game. I don't know. I'm a little bit lower on them than that line of 4. But what are your thoughts on Nick Chubb tonight?
Yeah, I think the price point is very interesting on him because last week, just relative to that showdown slate, he was just underpriced and it was pretty obvious. This week, I think he still comes in a little bit underpriced. But yeah, it's all about, there's a couple players on the slate, and Nick Chubb's probably, him and Odell are really where you have to, like you were just saying, build out a narrative in your head and see how you fit them in to feel comfortable with it. Because a guy like Nick Chubb, if you want him in your captain spot, there's some pretty clear narratives there that make sense. This game goes different than Vegas thinks, and Cleveland gets ahead by a decent amount. Nick Chubb's the reason why. And then on the opposite side, you have to get some Rams pass catchers and Goff, things like that. So if that's a narrative that you want to think in your head, one that would definitely be low owned because a lot of people will lean on the side of Vegas, which makes sense more times than not, then yeah, it makes sense to kind of get to Nick Chubb in the captain. I like him more in the utility spot. I'd probably get to actually more Nick Chubb tonight in a captain spot than an Odell, just based on what I'm doing with the rest of the pricing while I tinker around here a little bit more. But yeah, I think Nick Chubb's fine. The only concern is the fact that, yeah, he was coming off the field in third downs. They're going to be in a game script that says maybe there's a lot more third down pass catching opportunities while they're trailing, which is, like you said, build a narrative for Dontrell Hilliard. I think he's okay. I have him marked down right now as like one of my top 5 interests. So trying to get him into lineups is somewhat of a priority, not a top priority, but right there in the top 5.
I like it. Like we said there about the captain as well. It looks like we have him projected for about 10% captain ownership, and we've given him about a 14% chance of being the top play on the slate. So you're getting a little bit of ownership value there as well if you fire up Nick Chubb. All right, let's move on to these Rams skill position games. Talk a little bit about Jared Goff and his home road splits and whether or not you believe he can do it against this decimated Browns secondary.
Yeah, so Jared Goff, I mean, on the road, he's much worse. Him and his wide receiver, Brandon Cooks, they have severe home road splits, but it's just the secondary that you're looking at in Cleveland tonight. I mean, they're going to be signing or starting undrafted free agents that haven't played snaps against 3 legit wide receivers on this team that are going to be running 90+% of the routes each. So, yeah, I like Jared Goff tonight. He's the guy that I would get to over Baker Mayfield if you wanted to play a quarterback. I usually try to play a quarterback in each of my lineups, just one. And if I'm following that model tonight, it would be Jared Goff. The home road splits are a concern for sure. But when you factor in just 4 defensive backs being down for Cleveland tonight, and the players that are going to be coming in place after that who have experience are not grading out well at all in Pro Football Focus, yeah, Jared Goff is a guy that I'm probably going to get to. And it's weird to kind of prioritize your lineup around a quarterback, but this is a very unique situation. So I'm going to not get to him in a captain spot, but in a utility build off of that.
So this is where I was kind of going. I kind of was sneakily liking him as a captain spot pick, and then because he spreads the ball around so much with those 3 wide receivers and Everett, it's sort of it's kind of the ideal spot. Whereas like when you're talking about the Browns, it's more likely that one of these receivers, like whether it's Landry or more likely Beckham, is going to be the highest scoring player on that team. So I kind of like a sneaky contrarian stack for large GPPs with Goff and the captain, and then pairing him with 3 receivers. But yeah, I kind of agree with you there. This secondary. Do you think that Cleveland's gonna like change their strategy? Like what do you think? Let's say you're Cleveland, you're coming in, you got like, you know, guys off the street playing in your backfield or in your defensive back for you. What are you doing differently to try and contain the Rams here?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Cleveland tonight, it's always challenging because like running a zone has its advantages in a situation like this where you can have people kind of bail you out a little bit when you don't have experience on the field. But at the same time, there's clear disadvantages to a zone when you have players that can sit down and Brandon Cooks beat the zone, but have players like Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp who can just destroy the zone and the short passes. So I honestly don't know the proper way to go when you have not this much experience. I would probably lean man to man, and then they're going to clearly need safety help over the top. So what I see from that is just bigger games for in the early part of the game, depending on who they're going to be picking up. A guy like Brandon Cooks, who just clearly is like a guy for a showdown slate that makes sense. And now he has a matchup where he can just fly by players. But if you see like early on, and if you want to play, again, a narrative that they're going to have a lot of safety help because their one safety is a guy who's a starter, and then the other one started last week with Burnett being hurt, then getting to guys like Cooper Kupp on the underneath routes makes a little bit more sense because you'll see more just one-on-one man-to-man. And Cooper Kupp right now and Robert Woods, both top 15 in separation in the league. So if you're going to have separation on starting quality cornerbacks and now you're going to get backups, you can be damn sure that they're going to have even more separation tonight.
Some damn fine analysis right there, Sal.
Thanks. I just went with it.
All right, let's talk about this receiving group. So we have them projected like right around each other, in both in terms of ownership, in terms of point projections. How are you separating between Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks, and Robert Woods? Or are you just like throwing numbers at the problem and hoping that you can kind of get that right combination?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. If I had to like break it down, if somebody's like watching this right now and wants to play 1, 2, 3 lineups, I think I feel most confident going with a Cooper Kupp tonight because of those reasons. He's Goff's main option. He's the guy he relies on. He's going to be in the slot with by far probably the best matchup. But it's so close between all of them. Kupp's running 90% of the routes this year right now, or 90% of the snaps. He has 64 routes run. He would be the guy that I prioritize the most. if I was playing one lineup. And then right there, it's really close. But Brandon Cook's number 2. He's a little bit cheaper. He's on 92% of the snaps, running 67 routes so far this year. It's just crazy that they have 3 guys on their team, each 90+% of the snaps, each at least 64 routes run. That's just nuts that it's like that solidified of a core and how often that they run just 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers. But I would go Cup and then Cooks really close. Like Cooks is like your stereotypical GPP player out of these 3. So especially for a showdown slate, it makes sense there. So it's really close between those 2. And then that just makes Robert Woods seem like he's a bad play to me, but he's not. He's also a fine play. So that's just the way that I rank it for a showdown slate would be Cup, Cooks, and then Woods, in terms of just how often I think that those players finish in a winning lineup. And I think having like both Cooks and Woods or both Cup and Cooks makes sense as well if you wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on it there, right? It's like Brendan Cooks has that game-breaking ability. If you go back and look at their game logs, it's like, Woods is always between like 70 and 100 yards, a couple outliers and like maybe 1 TD. And Cooks just has these like behemoth games every once in a while where he's going for like 160. So if you're going for GPPs, and all the ownership's the same, between those 2, you probably want to roster Cooks, right?
Yeah. If you're I would say so. Yeah, he fits a GPP build a little bit better. The only concern, the only concern would be like he does have home road splits, but I guess it's the same type of theory there for like Jared Goff in that these guys that he's going up against are just so less talented than he is.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually like it's kind of startling how close these guys are grouped together. Like we're within a percentage point on everything, on ownership, on projection. So it's just so hard to differentiate between them. And I think that's something that people kind of I think the only real answer is to just enter more than one lineup or enter some constructions where you have Goff paired with 2 of them. Do you have any interest in pairing Goff in the captain spot, like I mentioned with my supposedly probably stupid but sneaky Goff in the captain, all 3 of those guys on your roster lineup? There was one game last year where that would have paid dividends.
Yeah, I remember there was a game last year. I don't know if that was it. I remember Big Ben was in the captain spot one week. Yeah, Big Ben was in the captain spot. He threw like 4 touchdowns or 5 touchdowns to 5 different guys. So, I mean, that's the way that you have to have it happen. Like, you see quarterbacks so rarely in the captain spot for a couple of reasons. Because, yeah, if they're going off, there's a really good chance one of the receivers went off, or they're just too expensively priced that there's somebody else that fits the mold better. But that's what you need then. You need a situation like this where you have 3 wide receivers, and those 3 are like the only guys running routes. Like Josh Reynolds, sure, people know the name, but he's just not running a ton of routes or even getting on the field all that much. So it's like those 3 guys and then Gerald Everett are the 4 that I would say have an opportunity to catch touchdown passes tonight. You need it to work very specifically for that to work, but that's also like just the name of the game for Showdown is very low. Like just low chance things happening for you to actually bank the whole tournament by yourself. So like I usually don't get to quarterbacks in the captain spot, but it's probably something just for myself that I could even look into a little bit more in terms of just getting different naturally by doing it.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned it. So I know that Osmo really likes to use quarterbacks in the captain spot once in a while. And then I've done a couple of analysis of some top players and seen like they don't. So I think there's like a preference there. It's like sometimes people are into it. Sometimes DFS players aren't. I don't think there's a right answer there, but I certainly get your take about not wanting to roster them. It makes a lot of sense, especially when you have someone like Odell Beckham in this game where the upside is just so huge. Let's move on and talk a little tight end action. Tyler Higbee is out for the Rams tonight. That's probably going to mean a bunch of snaps for Gerald Everett. Are you going just 100%? Are you all in? And are you putting him in your captain spot at all?
Yeah, so before this Rashad Higgins news, him being inactive came out, like now Damian Ratley is definitely a viable play. But I'm not going to have Gerald Everett in the captain spot, but I'm going to have a ton of interest. Like I'm going to have more of Gerald Everett in terms of like value plays between Ratley and Harris and all these guys down here than really anywhere else to kind of fill out my lineup. So right now the Rams do utilize tight ends a lot. There's just 2 of them that are viable. They've ran 60 routes this year between Higbee and Everett. Everett has run 38 of those routes. There's been 6 red zone targets between the 2 of them. They've each seen 3 of them. So Everett's on the field a decent amount of the time in terms of snap percentage for a tight end. And the only reason he's not out there more is because Higbee's been taking up those snaps. Both of them quality tight ends. But now you get Everett going to be out there probably projecting for around 30 routes run tonight in a game where they have a high total. I really like him at the price point. I think he's probably like $2,000 too cheap. I just couldn't imagine like paying for a kicker over Gerald Everett tonight. There's some days where it makes sense to go to a kicker there over like just some backup tight end or something. But Everett's going to be like a realistic tight end in the red zone tonight, going to have like a realistic like 2 targets if they get there, just as often as they use tight ends in the red zone. So yeah, I like him. The price point just makes too much sense for me to want to get away from him. And I think he probably runs like 30 routes, sees a couple of red zone targets, and is on the field for 60+% of the game.
Do you think there's any chance that that they opt for more 10 personnel and include Josh Reynolds in light of the fact that that Higbee's out?
Yeah, it's actually a good question. I would say just the amount that they actually run 11 personnel, I would say no, just because if it was maybe like a Robert Woods being out, then maybe, just because they have to switch up their game plan a lot more. But I think they're just going to let Everett fill into that just role in terms of like 11 personnel with Everett on the field in close to the line. So yeah, I think they'll still run like their normal 90% of those guys each. You probably do get a little bit more snaps from Josh Reynolds because of that, but I don't think it's like a whole game script, just scenario switch.
All right, what about Johnny Munt?
I honestly don't even know. I mean, yeah, I don't know that. Has he like been on the field? I mean, I assume not because they only like run those two guys, but I assume he's like the fill-in for Higbee.
He has not been on the field. So if the question is whether or not he has a chance of becoming that like for like Higbee replacement, and they continue on to use the same packages, at which point he might be like kind of a nice dart throw. But I like where your head's at with Everett.
Yeah, I definitely like Everett. That's actually interesting because I was like scanning all the tight ends because there's like so many backup tight ends, it seemed, for like the Browns on here. And then I just glossed over Johnny Munn. I'm not going to have interest, but yeah, that is interesting because he'll probably, if he was to take on that full responsibility, I don't think I have no idea about this guy, but I'm not sure if he matches the exact Tyler Higbee like athleticism and build that they're looking for in the offense. But yeah, I'm just going to say right now, like I don't have any.
I'm guessing more of a blocking tight end. He did have 23 receptions, 330 yards in his final year in his senior season at Oregon. So he's got some skills there. But I think you're right. The only real reason to go to someone like that is just ownership, right? Because no one's going to be there on him. You're probably going to get him at sub 1%. And hey, the guy catches a touchdown pass at $900 or $200 or whatever he is, then you're looking pretty good.
No, yeah, I agree. I'm looking right now just like what overall ownership was. Okay, so Higbee's actually Everett's actually picking up ownership, which makes sense.
Yeah. I'm assuming he's going to be like down there. It's probably going to be, it's going to be Ratley and it's going to be Everett. It's going to be Harris. Those are going to be the three main targets, and I think they're going to get their fair share of ownership. I don't see why they wouldn't. So if you want to pivot for larger GPPs off those guys, you're going to have to get a little bit creative for sure. All right. So we got the tight ends, we got the wide receivers. What are we doing with Todd Gurley and Malcolm Brown and maybe Darrell Henderson?
Yeah. So Henderson for me, I'm probably not going to get to because I mean he hasn't played many snaps all that much. He's a guy like that. I didn't start drafting as early as like everybody else, but everybody was on him in like the 5th round, and that just right now it's just like a stash thing in a season long. But no interest there tonight. Yeah, this is like the most interesting spot. I mean, you have some guys filling in. But it's like, kind of from a 2-week sample, Todd Gurley is going to be limited. I think I'm still consider myself like a little bit of a Todd Gurley truther. But after like week 1, we saw 70% of the snaps. Week 2, they actually went down to like his like 3-year low, which is concerning. But they do want to keep him fresh, which makes sense for their own playoff hopes and chances. So you see Malcolm Brown picking up a decent amount of snaps, a third of the snaps or so in there. And I do think week 1 was something that stood out as something people took a little overreacting to. You saw 2 touchdowns. Those were on Malcolm Brown drives. You saw 11 touches on the ground to Todd Gurley's 14. I just think that was by coincidence because we did see like 2/3 or 66, 70% of the snaps week 1 were to Gurley. And then you saw really only 25 to 30 to Malcolm Brown, but you saw a very even touch split on the ground. I just think that was the way that those drives ended up going. Week 2, we saw a little bit differently of how the story is probably going to be, similar to the snap counts is what you'll get out of opportunity. So in saying all of that and the other value that we have on the slate, I'm probably not going to get to Malcolm Brown at his price point because there's just other options that I think grade out very similarly for $2,000 less and at similar ownership too. So it's just kind of an easy pick for me. At Todd Gurley, that's the main question at 9,600. It's just really hard for me to want to get to Todd Gurley over Nick Chubb, even though Gurley's a favorite in this game. It's just still so hard because we do know Nick Chubb will have some aspect of a pass catching role. And at least when it comes down to me, it's saying, do I want to get to Todd Gurley in a lot of my like kind of game script scenarios, or do I want to get to Nick Chubb or like a Cooper Kupp? And I'm just going to be getting to those guys more. So Todd Gurley for me is like a guy who's getting lost a little bit on this slate. It might be the wrong decision, but I guess you can't get pieces of everybody in every single one of your lineups.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so it looks like Todd Gurley's getting about a 65% share, snap share, and Malcolm Brown about 35. That hasn't wavered too much from weeks 1 and 2. Are you at all worried? I know you said you thought it was a little bit coincidental. Are you a little worried about Malcolm Brown's role in the red zone? He has, I think, he's like top 5 in the NFL in red zone touches.
Yeah, no, I'm not too worried about it. I think those were just really like week 1 coincidental a little bit. Because we saw last week, like Todd Gurley still got his red zone work and got a red zone touchdown, goal line touchdown. So I'm not too worried about that in terms of like him being like a primary red zone back, unless we start to see just more of Todd Gurley coming off the field. Because we've yet to see Todd Gurley come out and Malcolm Brown come in for him. At least I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that's fair. What about this from a running perspective? We've seen we've had two thirds, or I can't remember if they replaced their center, but they basically got 2 sophomores starting on this Rams offensive line this year. Are you at all worried about that? Because this offensive line was the strength of this team. They have probably the best tackle combo in the entire NFL. Now all of a sudden you're replacing Roger Saffold. You're replacing I think is Brian Allen new there? I can't remember, but they're basically replacing 2/3 or all of their interior offensive line. If I'm wrong about that, what does that do to your like sort of long-term outlook, or how does it apply to a game like this where you're going up against the Browns, who like what fairly stout inside? You got Sheldon Richardson there. Like this is a fairly stout run stuffing unit. Definitely. What's just your general take on that?
Yeah, I think actually the matchup, like the defensive line versus offensive line, it probably favors closer to Cleveland so far. I think this offensive line for the Rams has actually held up pretty well, especially in run protection. And like the main thing that I've looked at for the Rams and like this whole saga around Todd Gurley is like they have so much success on this team out of play action. And the reason why is because people know Todd Gurley's a weapon. And like through the first 2 games when they've gone play action with Todd Gurley back there, it still looked fine. And the offensive line is held up, which I think is like their biggest piece of their offense is play action. So overall, like I think the lines look fine through 2 weeks. I would say that, yeah, that probably leans that the defensive line of the Cleveland actually has an advantage tonight. But just in terms of like long-term look for the line, through 2 weeks, I think it's okay. Long-term look for like this offense, I just think they have to keep, and that's what bodes well for Todd Gurley, unless he just gets completely injured. Like they have to keep him on the field because he is a weapon back there in the play action game. Even if he's not touching the ball, it makes it that much more advantageous for him to be on the field.
All right, I like it. Before we get on to what you're all here for, kickers and defense, we need Alex for this because he's the kicker whisperer, man. He knows what's up. So I just want to talk a little bit about the packages we have at Osmo.com. We have Express memberships starting for as low as $3.95 per week, which is a great deal. You get access to Alex's rankings. So best rankings in the entire industry. And as well, we have this new tool if you want to sign up for one of the premium packages. It's Showdown single game projections relative to captain spot. So if we think, for example, give you a little free tidbit here, we think Odell Beckham Jr. Osmo, I should say, thinks Odell Beckham Jr. is a 30% chance, has a 30% chance of being the top scoring player tonight, but is just 18% owned in the captain spot. That provides you with some leverage. That's a great way to go about stacking your lineups using that ownership in play. So make sure to come on by, check it out. We've got a really, really great Slack chat as well, where everyone's involved in helping each other out, making those right decisions. So and as well, we in our Slack chat hours, Osmo does premium office hours once or twice a week where he answers all of your questions. So so many benefits to joining. You really need to if you're going to succeed in DFS these days. Yeah, have you? What's your take? Is this your first year on Osmo.com, Sal?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've been using like just starting towards when I came on board like a couple of weeks ago, really, or about a month ago, just starting using it for MLB. And like, I mean, the top stacks tool is just fantastic.
So good, right?
Yeah. I mean, it just gives you an overall, like a very quick look and just an overall like context of the slate pretty easily. So that's fantastic. And seeing it kind of carry over into NFL is exciting. I've been trying to like utilize it into my process. And so far it seems very useful. All
right. I like it. Let's move on. Kickers. Kind of going to probably fly under the radar tonight. Greg Zuerlein, Austin Siebert. You got any hot takes on those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer Greg Zuerlein just in terms of like looking at like Vegas totals. I guess you can flip that and just say if offense just stalls a little bit on the Cleveland side, more so for a kicking game there. But I prefer Greg Zuerlein. But I mean, my take on kickers for Showdown is like if your game script or whatever you think has a kicker scoring double-digit points, then you'll get to them more than probably I will, just because whenever you see a kicker projection, it's like 6 or 7 points. So it's not something that pops when there's a higher total game like tonight. So like for me, I don't have as much interest in kickers tonight I was looking ahead to tomorrow night's slate, and tomorrow night's slate just looks absolutely disgusting. Bears in Washington. So like more interest in that sort of game. Yeah, it just looks terrible. I was trying to like analyze just right now for showdown tomorrow, and it looks terrible. But yeah, just looking at kickers tonight, high totals, you can go both ways with that, more field goal opportunities, or it's just more players actually producing. And when you have, like we've already talked about in this game, you have just so many value plays that are cheaper than the kickers that just add up to, they can easily score like 8 points like a kicker can. And then you just have so many actual players in the game, whether it's a cheaper than I believe too cheap, like Jarvis Landry play, or any of just the top end plays. Like if you have many players scoring double digit points, it just makes it so much harder for a kicker to do that. And I think tonight's slate, more so than a lot of showdown slates, you have that. So I'm probably just not going to get to as many kickers. And that being said, I'm not playing all that many lineups, like single digit lineups. I'm probably going to end up playing tonight.
Yeah, makes sense. I think like more often than not, just going off the data this year, you're looking pretty good if you've got one kicker in your lineup. I wouldn't get carried away and put two kickers in. That usually doesn't. Anything can work. If it's contrarian, but we have so far had 4 instances from our 7 showdown slates where a kicker has been on the lineup. So and as well with those lineups so far with the we've had 7 showdown slates, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. So we've had wide receivers in the captain spot in the winning lineup 5 different times, which probably bodes well for your Odell Beckham. Quarterback once and running back once. So there you go. And also
you said 5 of how many were wide receivers in captain?
Yes, I think we've had 7 showdown slates so far. Beckham Jr., Chris Godwin, Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, and Allen Robinson. Those are the captain winners on DK thus far this year. So there you go. If you want to fire up that wide receiver, and maybe we'll get a repeat from Monday night's game where Seibert and Beckham Jr. are in the same lineup. Who knows? Let's move on to defenses here. So we've already talked a little bit about how the Browns Browns secondary is pretty weak, but they still have a very strong front. This interior of the Rams offensive line is weak. Are you at all on the Browns, D, tonight?
So yeah, right now I have listed both defenses as like the way that I put it in is like an X is like a no to maybe. So right now the Browns rank below the Rams. So I'm not probably going to get too much Browns defense. Yeah, the line. The main thing is here, like, can they force pressure and force turnovers? Jared Goff's not a guy who turns the ball over a ton. When he misses, he like purposely misses low. Like that's the way he was trained to throw. So like the only way you're going to get to him mainly is if sacks and then any sort of fumble. And in the same exact kind of analysis earlier is that I would much rather get to like Gerald Everett and even Damian Ratley, who you're going to save money on, than get to the Browns defense against a quarterback that's just not going to make a ton of mistakes.
All right. Flip side, Rams. Baker Mayfield hasn't looked great thus far this year. They're going on the road. They got no Njoku. Any interest in the Rams, D?
Yeah, it's probably, with them being even more expensive, it's probably still going to be no. Like the Cleveland's offense has even like Odell's long touchdown on their last primetime slate made it look and kind of hid some things about this Cleveland offense that it really hasn't been that great, or at least it's really hard to hit the expectations that all the hype was coming in on them, but it hasn't looked that great. Now you lose Njoku, like you said. Aaron Donald being there for the Rams surely helps if you want to make this play. Like if he wasn't in, I probably wouldn't have any interest. So if I was to get to a defense, like I kind of hinted at earlier, it would be the Rams, but then you're paying like $4,600 and it just gets to a price point where you're probably being contrarian by doing it. But similar to like the kickers, I don't know if you actually need to kind of get there, and you're going to be very touchdown dependent on it. So it's kind of just like flipping a coin at that point, and actually probably worse because it's nowhere near 50-50.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm having trouble getting to them tonight. That's for sure. But I think, let me just pull up our projections here, because I think like we're probably not projecting them for too much ownership. Right now we have the Rams, substantial, but 25% for the Rams and 22% in the utility spot. If you want to get really contrarian, you pop them in the captain spot. But I don't think there's going to be many people doing that tonight, and I think you're probably this is probably not the game to do it. So let's just move on and talk just a little bit about general captains and lineup construction tonight. So let's say you're starting to line up off. Let's just start with the Browns. You got to line up with Odell Beckham Jr. What does that look like for you? How are you going down there? Who are you pairing him with? Is Baker Mayfield just a 100% lock in all of your Beckham Jr. lineups as a captain?
Yeah, so I think that's interesting. I don't think he is 100% lock in all those lineups. Like in terms of like correlation, yeah, that makes sense. But if you want to correlate like the rest of the slate and then take salary into effect there, like having Baker in a flex, if you have Odell in your captain, you probably need the other side of that to be like Gerald Everett scoring 2 touchdowns or something. And then that gets close to where, well, does he need to be in the captain spot? Because it's a spot where you have to hope that just Cooper Kupp and Cooks just aren't going off and you don't need them in your lineup because you can't fit them. So I think like getting to Odell in the captain spot, the thing that I lean the most is running it back with Jared Goff and just some pass catchers. And the guys that make it a little bit easier are like Gerald Everett filling it in. And then honestly, all these Rams wide receivers, since they're all so close, they probably are driving each other's prices down by like an easy $400 or $500 each. So yeah, getting to like Robert Woods and Gerald Everett and even a Brandon Cooks and just overloading it and saying that Odell is just going to absolutely go nuclear, similar to how he did last week, 106 yards and a touchdown. And then you have to just run it back with just Jared Goff just going off in a shootout. So I think that's where I go more so. Just because I do like, in general, Jared Goff a little bit more. So, yeah, pairing it with Baker Mayfield and Odell, correlation makes sense. But then it's just really so hard to build a whole lineup out without getting – because you can't get the Jared Goff after that. And it's really just tough to do that and kind of picture that he wouldn't be needed in a lineup if Odell's kind of a captain. But you could build different scenarios out. That's just like the one that I build out for an Odell captain.
Yeah, makes sense. I think we talked about the other side of this game a lot too. Jared Goff with all 3 of these receivers, like there's no like it's pretty much Brandon Cooks would be the most logical choice I think in the captain spot, and then you're basically just taking your chances, right? Like you're mixing and matching them. It's really hard to differentiate between these guys. Yeah,
this has to be the hardest team for like a showdown slate to try and just get pieces of, because it's like Robert Woods hasn't had himself a game yet. And that can very easily happen tonight for Robert Woods' 2-touchdown game. Like all of these Rams wide receivers have either 100+ touchdown upside or 2-touchdown upside, and that's exactly what you want in a showdown captain.
All right, let's talk ownership fades. Our highest projected owned player tonight looks to be, I'm guessing it's going to be Odell Beckham Jr. Probably about this. These numbers might be a little bit off, but he's probably going to come in around the what do you think, 60 to 70% range?
60, 70 for Odell.
We have him. It looks like we have him at 50.
Yeah, I was going to say that
53. Okay, sorry, I had the wrong thing pulled up. Yeah, so we have him at 53. What do you think?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, is that just general ownership or is that captain?
Yeah, that's total captain and utility combined.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Like if I was playing a lot of lineups, I would get over that. I would get definitely more utility spot for him. I get it that it kind of restricts your lineup if you want to go captain, but yeah, I think that I would get more than that. It's a game script where they're going to have to pass. At least Vegas is saying that. In general, like at best, this is going to be a neutral game script just based on the secondary for the Browns, that Odell is going to be a factor in this game. So, yeah, I would have more than that. I don't think it's a necessity to have him in your captain spot by any means, but I would definitely have more than that, like 53% you said. Yeah, I would have more than that.
Are there any players on either side that you're fading just straight up because of ownership?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Nothing really stands out all that much. I guess you can like just say some cheaper end guys just because I like some other situations a little bit more. So I guess like a Damian Ratley, I would probably get less of just because I like Gerald Everett more. And when you get down to that point, it's actually nice because there's a couple of low end options tonight that I think are viable and they're pulling ownership from each other. So it makes it easier to feel good about the ownership you're getting on the guys that you like. So yeah, like I like Gerald Everett in that low range. So I probably just get less of Damian Ratley, Hilliard, and really probably no Hilliard and just less of Ratley.
I was just looking at Everett. We have projected for 23% total ownership on Draftkings and pretty close on Fanduel as well. All right, I'm gonna throw a couple contrarian stacks at you. Tell me what you think. Jared Goff, Todd Gurley.
Jared Goff and Todd Gurley. Well, that's interesting. I'm probably not going to get there just because of like the pricing. Tom just said that Odell's up to 61 now.
61.
Yeah, I still like Odell in a lot more in utility than in captain. But yeah, even at that ownership, I still do like it. Like I really like to think about fading players, and you see it all the time with running backs. We saw it with McCaffrey when like they start hitting the 85, 90% range. How much good are they actually doing for you at that point in terms of your actual chances of winning? If Odell's in 3 out of 5 lineups, I think there's enough wiggle room there that it makes sense. Whereas like, usually if a running back hits like 90% ownership and I'm playing, I think your leverage and like a really smart play is to just try and outweight the field or a play in general on the other end of that. And we saw it happen. I think somebody took down like the whole 250K just because they leveraged against McCaffrey, but I don't think it's high enough for me to be wanting to do that with Odell.
Yes, absolutely. That makes total sense. One of the great things we have here as well is our ownership gets updated throughout the day. So you get early ownership, and it looks like our ownership just updated as well. So we have 60% ownership for Odell Beckham Jr. All right, one more contrarian stack for you. Nick Chubb and Baker Mayfield. Yay or nay? Just purely based on contrarian value and whether or not you have the upside to win a tourney with those two.
I will go with nay.
All right. Not enough pass catching upside for Njoku. Or sorry, Chubb.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think like my primary interest in Chubb is probably sticking him in the captain spot and just saying that this game script goes different than Vegas and trying to get contrarian there and then running it back with like Goff and some of his pass catchers.
All right, makes sense. Final thoughts. We got about 5 minutes before lock here. Final thoughts on the Rams tonight and what people should be doing with their Rams lineup construction.
Yeah, I think if you're going to the Rams, that you just focus on the passing game. Like you're down 4 defensive backs for the Browns and like their top 3 cornerbacks. Like that's not great. If they're forced to play a zone because of that, that's even better for guys like Robert Woods and Kupp. We don't know that yet. So yeah, just focus on the passing game. I think Gerald Everett is in a fantastic spot in terms of just overall usage for your price point. You're getting him at a cheap price point. He's going to run 30 routes and be utilized heavy in the red zone where they should be multiple times tonight. So that's where I focus on the Rams side. When it comes to the Browns side, yeah, I think that I still focus on the passing game. I think that Jarvis Landry is somebody who gets a little bit overlooked tonight, and his price point I think is favorable enough that you can get to it in lineups and just make sure that it all correlates. So I think the main thing here is just do what makes sense and just get to the Rams passing game and see what correlates from there.
Awesome. All right, there you have it. Rams, Browns, we will be back tomorrow night to preview the Bears and Washington Redskins. What does your initial analysis have for that one? Any quick thoughts to leave our viewers with ahead of tomorrow night's action?
Yeah, I have like all my interests and everything sorted out for it. I mean, tomorrow night's slate, there's like 2 good players, maybe 3 good players on it that you can trust. Like you have Allen Robinson, Terry McLaurin, and just based on game script, I think Chris Thompson's interesting. And just looking into tomorrow early, I'm really confused at Trey Quinn's price. He's 3,800 and he's leading the team in routes run and snaps. Obviously not a big upside play, but I mean, you're talking about the Bears defense against Washington and Case Keenum, and there's not much talent outside of like a Terry McLaurin on that team. And then you're looking at a Bears team in that offense that's just looked absolutely abysmal outside of Allen Robinson. So yeah, tomorrow's slate looks disgusting. Like I've never had so many initial no's in terms of like every player. Like, I mean, you have all like the $200 players. So there's like 35 players on the slate. I've never had like pure yeses. I had like 3, and then I had to like really go back and say, you actually have to play 6 people, like start making some more yeses. So yeah, it doesn't look great. Like tonight's slate is by far levels ahead of in terms of like points wise and real game and good players, a lot better. So I guess enjoy it. But yeah, I mean, tomorrow it's going to be a showdown slate in the NFL season, so we can't complain too much.
See, that's why we have DFS. Chicago, Washington, week 3, Monday Night Football. These 2 teams look awful. DFS makes it all worthwhile. So we will be back tomorrow at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern to preview that game. It'll be myself and Eric Vodrovich. I think I said that right. And we have so much else going on as well at Osmo.com this week. The NFL Strategy Show. You are on Tuesdays, Thursdays. Is that right? Monday. Did I get that right? Tuesdays and Wednesdays?
Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nice. So 3 times. We got Dave Loughran. We got so many other hosts and guests. So stop on by. That show goes every single day at 11 Eastern. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys, and we will see you soon.